Stop adding too many keyframes for every small animation when you can just do it with 2 lines of expressions. Well, in this tutorial, we are going to learn the OG linear expression, which is not only going to make your animations dope, but also your life easier, because why not? Yo folks, this is Shank, a product and a motion designer, and without further ado, let's get rolling.
Alright, let's understand how linear function is written and how it's used in After Effects, right? So linear function has 5 parameters. The first parameter is the input, the type of input. The type of input can be anything. It can be a scale value, it can be an opacity value, it can be a rotation value, it can have a position value, or even an array in some cases. The next two values define the input range, so I'll call them in min and in max. I'll color these since these belong to same family. Yep. Okay, now the next two values define the output range, so I'll call them out min and out max. I'll put a different color on these. Yep. So what exactly happens in linear function? Now what linear function does is it maps the in-min value to the out-min value and in-max value to the out-max value, right? Well, let's visualize this with another graphic I have here. Yep. So this is the very basic input function, very straightforward input function. Now what is happening here? The linear function is taking some kind of input and it's mapping the minimum input value, which is 0 in this case, and the maximum input value, which is 100 in this case, to the outmin value, which is 0 again, and outmax value, which is 100 again. Like 0 is mapped to 0 and inmax value, which is 100, is mapped to outmax, which is like 100 in both cases, right? So what exactly, let's assume what we have here is a loading bar, which loads based on the percentage. Let's say if it's 100%, if the input is 100%, so it linear function calculates the corresponding output value, and it's 100 in this case. Since the mapping is straightforward, 0 is mapped to 0, 100 is mapped to 100. So if the input value is 100, the output value will be 100. Now let's say if the input is 50%, what will happen? The bar will be half filled like this, 50%, right? All right. So this was a very straightforward case. Now let's move to a little bit tricky case. Yep. So what we have done here is the in-min value, which is 0, is mapped to a value in between outmax and in outmin. So let's say 0 is mapped to 50. Now what exactly will happen here? Since 0 is mapped to 50, let's say this is a loading progress bar. So when the input is 0, the bar will be half filled because it's mapped to 50%, right? 0 is mapped to 50 and 100 is mapped to 100. 100 is mapped to 100 here. Yep. Now when what will happen? When the input value is 100, the bar will be 100% filled, since 100 is mapped to 100. In max is 100, out max is also 100, right? Now what will happen when the input value is 50? What will happen in this case? Now since the mapping here is 0 is mapped to 50 and 100 is mapped to 100, the linear function will calculate the corresponding value in output range for the input value of 50. Now in this case, when the input value is 50, the output value will be 75 as calculated by the linear function, right? Well, you can map any value, like you can map the in-min value to 60, 70, whatever number you like, and the linear function will calculate the corresponding value for the input which we give, right? Now this was the simple visualization of a linear function. Now let's create something in After Effects with the linear function. Alright folks, now we are in After Effects and I have this simple scene setup here. There's this text layer which says please subscribe my channel, and there's this screen loading bar which is going to fill. Right now this is animating using trim path, but in this tutorial we are going to animate it using linear function, right? So let's start. Let's first animate the percentage fill bar. Now what I'm going to do first, I'm going to create a new null object here. Yes, let's rename it. Let's call it controller. On the null object, we are going to apply a slider control. Go into the effects and presets and search for slider control. Drag and drop it to the null layer, right? Now, why we did this? Why there is a slider control on this controller layer? Now, this slider control is going to control multiple animations in this scene, right? So let's see how. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect the N property, which is making this green bar fill, to the slider control, right? Now let's connect it to the slider control. Well, I'm going to open the controller layer, effects, and the slider control, right? So first I'm going to alt click on the stopwatch icon on the End property. It's going to open the expression editor. Now we don't have to write anything, the expression will write itself. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab the pick whip and connect it to the slider like this, right? Now what does this line of expression means? Well, whatever value is there on the slider, it's going to have that, right? So let's put this line in a variable. Let's call the variable progress, and progress equal to this. Now whatever the value is there on the slider control, let's say the slider control has a value of 30, so the progress will be 30%, right? Now let's write linear function for this. Now what I'm going to do, write linear, and the first thing we input in linear is the input value. Now in this case it's progress. Now whatever the value is there, it's going to map in the input range. So the input range for the slider control here is 0 to 100, and let's map it to the End property, which also has a range of 0 to 100, right? Now let's see what happens here. Now when I increase the slider value, the progress bar fills like this, right? Yep. Now let's animate the text. Now what I'm gonna do, I want text opacity to increase as the progress bar fills. So I'm going to connect the opacity of the text to the slider control. So I'm going to press T for the opacity. I'm going to alt click or option click if you're using Mac, and grab the pick whip, put it on the slider control, and let's put this in a variable text opacity, right? Yep. Now the text opacity will take the value from the slider. Whatever the value is there on the slider, let's say it's 50, so it's going to take 50. Now let's write linear function for this. Now in linear function, the first thing we have is input, which is text opacity in this case. What is the range for our slider? It's 0 to 100. And what is the minimum and maximum value in opacity? Minimum value is 0 and 100, right? Now what we have done, we have connected the opacity to the slider control. Now let's see. When the slider control value is 0, we don't see that text, and the fill is also 0. Now as we increase the text opacity will also increase. Now when the text slider control value is 100, the text opacity value is 100, right? Let's make it a little more interesting. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go in effects and presets, search for light wipe. Yep, drag and drop it to the text layer. Now what I'm going to control here with slider control, I'm going to control this completion property, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open the CC light wipe in the layer, alt click on the completion property. Now it's going to open again the expression editor. I'm just going to connect it with the slider control like this. Now let's call it light wipe. I'm naming the variable as light wipe. You can name whatever you want, and write the linear function for this. Linear here is light wipe. Input range is 0 to 100 for slider control. Now what exactly is happening here? When the completion is 0, it's fully visible, and when the completion is 100, the text is not visible. So I'm going to reverse map here. So I'm going to map 0 to 100 and 100 to 0 like this. Now let's see what happens here. Now when the slider value is 0, we see nothing. We don't see the text, we don't see the fill. Now as we increase the slider value, we also see the text starts animating like this, right? Yep. Now as I see, the text starts animating something like when the bar is like this much filled. So I guess I have to map it to a different value. Let's try mapping it with 50. 0 is mapped to 50. Now let's start with, let's look at it. Yep. All right. Now let's apply the keyframe. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to keyframe the slider. I'm going to put a keyframe here on the 0 second, and on the 4 second I'm going to put a keyframe like this, 100. Right, I'm going to easy ease. All right, let's see. Now see, only 2 keyframes are animating 3 properties here in this scene. So what these 2 keyframes are animating? Well, these 2 keyframes are animating this loading bar, the opacity of this text, and the effect we applied, the light wave effect we applied on this text, right? So I can connect more properties to this slider control. I can change the color of the text, even change the color of the bar, and n number of things I can do with just 2 keyframes, right? So if you are that guy who bombards keyframe, imagine how much effort this is going to save you when you have a very complex scene to animate, right? Here are some more examples I did with linear expression. First one is this battery animation. This is similar to what we just learned, and this is again done with 2 keyframes only. The 2 keyframes here are changing the battery fill, the numbers according to the how much fill is done, and the background color also. Like if you see, the on 0% is red and slightly changes to green when it's 100%, right? And here is another example in which these beautiful pearls are animating in sync, and this is all done with just 2 keyframes using linear expression. And in this, like, you just have to animate one group, and then again you have to duplicate and place it such that they look in sync, right? So this is very simple to animate, and I hope this was helpful. Well, this is it for this video. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and if you learned something new, please consider subscribing my channel. I'll come up with more amazing stuff ahead. See you in the next video. Till then, this is me, Shashank, signing off.